History isn't neat. It's a battlefield of competing stories, cover-ups, and mysteries that refuse to stay buried. Behind every polished, official version, there's a stranger, scarier, or just plain dumber possibility. Today we're diving straight into the controversies that textbooks politely skip, from vanishing armies to moon landing conspiracies. This is history's weirdest open case file. 1. You've heard the stories about the Bermuda Triangle, that patch of the Atlantic that supposedly eats ships and planes for breakfast. It's the ultimate paranormal mystery, a vortex of cosmic weirdness where compasses fail and rescue teams vanish. But then the statistical party poopers show up. They point out that this is one of the busiest, most hurricane-prone waterways on the planet, and when you account for the sheer volume of traffic, the number of incidents is, well, completely normal. So, what's the real story? Is it a mysterious, hungry anomaly that defies the laws of physics? Or is it just a classic case of Mother Nature's bad temper combined with some cosmic-level bad luck and a media that can't resist a spooky story? The debate rages because one version is way more fun. 2. Finding a ship adrift in the ocean isn't that weird. Finding the Mary Celeste in 1872, however, was a problem. The ship was in perfect sailing condition. Its cargo of industrial alcohol was untouched, and there was plenty of food and water for the crew. The only thing missing was the crew itself. All 10 souls on board had vanished, leaving behind their clothes, valuables, and even their pipes. This wasn't a scene of chaos, it was a scene of absence. It's not a whodunit, it's a what the hell happened it. Theories about pirates, mutiny, or even a giant squid attack have all been floated, but nothing fits. The crew seemingly abandoned a perfectly safe vessel for a tiny lifeboat in the middle of the ocean. It remains the ocean's most polite and baffling ghosting. 3. If you want a historical event that feels like a horror movie script written by a madman, look no further than the Dyatlov Pass incident. In 1959, 9 seasoned hikers were found dead in the Ural Mountains under the most bizarre circumstances imaginable. Their tent was sliced open from the inside. They had fled into the frozen wasteland without proper clothing, and some had suffered injuries so catastrophic, crushed ribs and skulls, they were comparable to a high-speed car crash, yet with no external wounds. Oh, and one was missing her tongue. So, what happened? Pick your poison. An avalanche they somehow outran. A secret Soviet weapons test gone wrong. An attack by the indigenous Mansi people. Or the truly bizarre theory of infrasound driving them insane. Every logical explanation falls apart under scrutiny. 4. Yes, we have to talk about the Apollo moon landing. For most of the world, it was humanity's crowning achievement, a moment of unity and wonder. But for a vocal minority, it was the most expensive and elaborate movie ever produced. The controversy isn't just a fringe idea. It's a persistent cultural phenomenon fueled by claims of waving flags in a vacuum, missing stars in the sky, and shadows that just don't look right. While scientists have patiently explained the physics behind every single anomaly, the theory that it was all faked in a studio to bankrupt the Soviet Union in the space race refuses to die. Was it one giant leap for mankind? Or was it the greatest lie ever told, proving that with enough money and power you can convince the world of anything? 5. Long before serial killers became a true crime obsession, there was Jack the Ripper, history's most successful and hideously famous ghost. In 1888, he terrorized the dark, foggy alleys of London's East End, performing a series of gruesome murders with terrifying surgical precision. But he didn't just kill, he performed, taunting the police and the press with letters, creating his own legend. The controversy isn't just about the murders, it's about his identity, a complete and total blank. The list of suspects reads like a bizarre casting call. A royal surgeon, a struggling artist, a foreign sailor, or even the Queen's own grandson. He was never caught, never identified, leaving a permanent and terrifying vacancy in history's Hall of Infamy. 6. The official story of Marilyn Monroe's death is tidy, tragic, and for many, full of holes. In 1962, the world's most famous woman was found dead from a probable suicide due to a drug overdose. But that word, probable, is doing a lot of heavy lifting. This wasn't just any celebrity, this was a woman who was intimately involved with both the president, John F. Kennedy, and his brother, the Attorney General. That's a social circle that doesn't appreciate scandals. Did she know too much about their political or personal lives? Was her death an orchestrated hit by the mafia to get leverage on the Kennedys? The alternative to suicide isn't just an accident. It's a full-blown political assassination, transforming a Hollywood tragedy into a dark conspiracy at the heart of American power. 7. Imagine being a prisoner so dangerous that your very face is considered a state secret. That was the reality for the man in the Iron Mask, an unidentified individual imprisoned in France for over 30 years during the reign of King Louis XIV. He was forced to wear a mask, most likely black velvet, not iron, whenever he was in public view, and his jailers were under strict orders to kill him if he ever spoke about who he was. Forget a gag order. The French monarchy issued a face order. So who could possibly be worth that much trouble? The most romantic and enduring theory is that he was the king's own identical twin brother, locked away to prevent any challenge to the throne. His existence was a threat that had to be literally masked from the world. 8. Losing a squad of soldiers is a tragedy. Losing an entire 50,000-man army is just careless. According to the ancient Greek historian Herodotus, that's exactly what happened in 524 BC. The Persian king Cambyses II sent his massive force into the Egyptian desert to conquer an oasis, and they were supposedly swallowed whole by a gigantic freak sandstorm, wiped off the face of the earth. It's a fantastic story of hubris and divine punishment. The only problem? In over 2 millennia, archaeologists haven't found a single shred of evidence. No bones, no armor, nothing. This has led many to believe the story is a complete fabrication, an ancient smear campaign designed by Cambyses' enemies to make him look like an incompetent fool cursed by the gods. 9. So you're an ancient civilization in the Peruvian desert, and you decide to do some art. But instead of a cave painting, you create hundreds of gigantic drawings of animals and geometric shapes so massive they can only be properly seen from an airplane. This is the absurd reality of the Nazca Lines. For what possible reason did they create a massive spider, a hummingbird, and a weird humanoid figure often nicknamed the astronaut? Were they elaborate astronomical calendars or sacred pathways for religious rituals? Or, as the wilder theories suggest, were they simply ancient welcome mats and landing strips for extraterrestrial visitors? The sheer effort involved for an audience that couldn't exist at the time makes this one of history's most baffling and wonderfully extra art projects. 10. The story of Pocahontas, as told by Disney, is a heartwarming tale of love and harmony between cultures, complete with a talking willow tree. The historical controversy, however, suggests a much darker reality. Was she a willing ambassador who fell in love with John Rolfe and happily converted to Christianity? Or was she a child, around 10 or 11 years old when she first met John Smith, who was later captured, held for ransom, and used as a political pawn by the English colonists? Her marriage and subsequent trip to London, where she was paraded around as a civilized savage, look less like a fairy tale and more like a calculated propaganda campaign to attract investors to the Virginia colony. The debate is about whether she was a symbol of peace or a victim of it. 11. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart died at 35, a tragic end for a once-in-a-millennium genius. The official cause was a severe fever, which is entirely plausible. But history loves drama, and a far spicier narrative has clung to his death for centuries, that he was poisoned. And the prime suspect has always been his less talented but more successful rival, Antonio Salieri. The story, immortalized in the play and film Amadeus, paints Salieri as a man driven mad with jealousy by Mozart's effortless brilliance, resorting to murder to silence the divine music he could never create himself. Was it a simple, tragic illness that took the world's greatest composer? Or was it the final, desperate act in the most high-stakes musical rivalry of all time? 12. The official account of the September 11th attacks is one of catastrophic failure. a cunning terrorist plot that caught the world's most powerful intelligence agencies completely by surprise. For many, however, the official story itself is what's unbelievable. This controversy isn't just about small details, it's a fundamental questioning of the narrative. How could the most protected airspace on Earth be so easily breached? Why did multiple skyscrapers collapse in a way that, to some observers, resembled controlled demolitions? These questions have fueled theories that powerful figures within the US government either had prior knowledge of the attacks and deliberately allowed them to happen to justify future wars, or were, in some darker versions, complicit. It's a debate between incompetence and conspiracy on an unimaginable scale. 13. Building Stonehenge was an absolutely insane undertaking. We're talking about prehistoric people dragging multi-ton stones over 150 miles, then shaping and erecting them into a precise celestial calendar. The controversy is simple. Why on earth would they do that? For centuries, people assumed it was a temple for Druid rituals, but it's thousands of years older than the Druids. Modern theories suggest it was an elite burial ground, a place of healing with magical properties, or a complex astronomical observatory. The sheer, back-breaking effort required suggests its purpose was of supreme importance to its builders. It's like they left behind the world's most impressive and mysterious piece of flat-pack furniture, but completely forgot to include the instruction manual. 14. The story of the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae is the ultimate tale of heroic sacrifice. It's a cinematic masterpiece of defiance, where a handful of warriors stood against a tidal wave of Persian invaders to save Western civilization. But was it truly a strategic masterstroke, or was it a glorious but ultimately avoidable blunder? The controversy lies in the tactics. The Spartans' heroic last stand only happened because the Persians found a mountain path that allowed them to surround the Greek forces. Did Leonidas and his men fail to properly guard this route? Was their sacrifice an inspiring necessity that bought the rest of Greece time? Or was it the fatal consequence of a tactical oversight, a moment of hubris that got a lot of very brave men killed for a cause that was almost lost? 15. When European colonists first encountered the stunning ruins of Great Zimbabwe, a massive stone city with towering walls and intricate stonework in southern Africa, they came to a logical conclusion. There was no way the local Africans could have built it. This racist assumption sparked a century-long controversy rooted in pure denial. Instead of giving credit to the indigenous Shona people, experts invented fantastical theories about ancient Phoenicians, the Queen of Sheba, or some other long-lost white civilization being the true architects. The real controversy isn't who built it. Archaeology has confirmed it was the ancestors of the local people. The controversy is the desperate, decades-long effort to erase a monumental African achievement from the history books. 16. On December 7, 1941, the attack on Pearl Harbor was described as a date which will live in infamy, a completely unprovoked and devastating surprise. But was it really a surprise? This is one of the most enduring and explosive controversies in American history. Evidence suggests that President Franklin D. Roosevelt's administration had extensive intelligence, including broken Japanese diplomatic and naval codes, indicating an attack was imminent. The conspiratorial view is that Roosevelt and his inner circle knew the fleet was in danger but deliberately withheld crucial warnings from the commanders in Hawaii. Why? Because they needed a catastrophic event to shatter American isolationism and galvanize the public into supporting entry into World War II. It frames the tragedy not as a failure of intelligence, but as a ruthless political calculation. 17. Deep in the Ohio countryside, there's a prehistoric masterpiece that poses a simple, maddening question. Why? The Great Serpent Mound is a nearly quarter-mile-long effigy of a snake, meticulously crafted from earth, appearing to swallow the sun. The sheer scale is baffling, but the real mystery is its purpose. This was a monumental undertaking for a pre-literate society, yet they left behind no user manual. Is it a sophisticated astronomical computer, with the snake's head aligning perfectly with the summer solstice sunset, a way to track seasons for agriculture? Or was it the site of intense rituals, a place of power we can no longer comprehend. The controversy is that all we have are educated guesses. Without any artifacts or writings, the mound remains a silent, giant, slithering question mark on the landscape, a message from the past we desperately want to read but can't. 18. Alexander the Great, a man who conquered the known world and wept because there were no more worlds to conquer, met an embarrassingly mundane end. He didn't fall to a worthy adversary's sword. He died in bed, shivering with fever. The official version is that a common illness like malaria or typhoid fever finally did what the entire Persian Empire couldn't. But this anticlimactic ending has never sat right with historians. His top generals, men who had followed him across continents, were exhausted by his endless campaigns and were already plotting how to carve up his vast empire. Conveniently, Alexander's slow, agonizing 2-week decline, complete with high fever and debilitating weakness, perfectly mirrors the symptoms of slow-acting poisons. The controversy is a battle between mundane reality and poetic justice. Did the world's greatest conqueror get taken out by a mosquito, or was he finally undone by the ambition he had instilled in his own men? 19. In the depths of the Great Depression, with America on its knees, a decorated Marine Corps general named Smedley Butler alleged a plot so outrageous it sounds like fiction. He claimed a powerful group of Wall Street financiers and industrialists, terrified that President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal was a gateway to communism, tried to recruit him to lead a military coup. The plan was to amass an army of 500,000 veterans, march on Washington, and install a fascist dictatorship with Butler as its figurehead. The controversy isn't just that he made the claim, it's that a congressional committee quietly concluded that parts of his story were true, and that a plot had indeed been discussed by some of the most powerful men in the country. Then, the entire affair was unceremoniously buried. No one was prosecuted. Was this a genuine, terrifyingly close call with American fascism, or the wild ramblings of a general that were blown out of proportion? 20. For over a century, the official story of the Great Sphinx of Giza was simple. The pharaoh Khafra carved it around 2500 BC to guard his pyramid. It was a settled fact of Egyptology. Then a handful of geologists showed up and ruined the party. They pointed to the deep, vertical weathering patterns on the Sphinx's body and the walls of its enclosure, arguing that these patterns were not caused by wind and sand, but by thousands of years of heavy rainfall. The colossal problem with this theory is that the Sahara hasn't seen that kind of climate since at least 5000 BC, potentially much earlier. This would make the Sphinx thousands of years older than the pyramids, suggesting the existence of a sophisticated, lost civilization from a much deeper past. It sparked a furious academic war, a clash between archaeologists protecting their established timeline and geologists pointing to the story told by the stone itself. 21. The story of the Gunpowder plot is a British legend. Guy Fawkes, the Catholic extremist, caught in the cellars of Parliament with enough gunpowder to blow the king and the entire government to kingdom come. He's the archetypal terrorist. But the controversy asks if he was a mastermind or a pawn in a much bigger game. The king's chief minister, Robert Cecil, was a brilliant and ruthless spy master who just so happened to have a vast network of informants that had penetrated the conspiracy from the start. Some historians argue he didn't just discover the plot, he nurtured it. He allowed the plotters to get their hands on the gunpowder and access the cellar, letting the conspiracy grow just big enough to be a terrifying public threat before he heroically foiled it. It was the perfect excuse to launch a brutal crackdown on Catholics and solidify his own power, a masterclass in political theater where Guy Fawkes was simply the lead actor in a tragedy he didn't write. 22. In 1944, Glenn Miller was the biggest musical star in the world. His big band sound was the soundtrack of the war effort, a beacon of home for millions of soldiers. Then, on a routine flight from England to a newly liberated Paris, his plane flew into the clouds over the English Channel and simply ceased to exist. The official story is that the small plane went down in bad weather. But the complete lack of any wreckage, debris, or remains created a vacuum that has been filled with controversy ever since. Was his plane accidentally destroyed by Allied bombers returning from an aborted mission, jettisoning their unused bombs over the channel as was standard procedure? Or, as more exotic theories suggest, was Miller, who held the rank of major, actually a spy involved in secret negotiations, and his disappearance was a covert hit? He didn't just die, he vanished, leaving behind an eternal mystery as smooth and haunting as his music. 23. The image of Che Guevara, staring intensely from under his beret, is one of the most recognizable and commercially successful symbols of rebellion on the planet. He is the icon of the romantic revolutionary, the doctor who gave up a comfortable life to fight for the oppressed. This is where the controversy explodes, because the man and the myth are two vastly different things. While the symbol stands for liberation, the man, as Fidel Castro's right hand, was a cold, calculating enforcer of a totalitarian state. As the head of the infamous La Cabaña prison, he personally presided over the summary trials and executions of hundreds of political opponents. He was a key figure in establishing Cuba's brutal labor camp system. The ferocious debate is over which Che is real: the heroic freedom fighter on the t-shirt, or the ruthless ideologue who saw individual lives as disposable for the sake of the revolution. 24. The Crusades are often portrayed as a grand, epic clash of civilizations, fueled by the pure fire of religious devotion. European knights, bearing the cross, marched thousands of miles to reclaim the Holy Land for their faith. But the controversy has always been about whether piety was the engine or just the hood ornament. Behind the religious fervor was a perfect storm of earthly ambition. For the Pope, it was a brilliant strategic move to redirect Europe's endlessly warring nobles toward an external enemy, unifying Christendom under his authority. For those landless younger sons of nobles, it was a divine license to seek fortune and carve out new kingdoms. For merchants from Venice and Genoa, it was a golden opportunity to establish lucrative trade monopolies. Was it truly a holy war? Or was it the medieval world's most successful and brutal pyramid scheme, promising salvation in the next life and incredible riches in this one? 25. Around 1200 BC, the civilized world hit a brick wall. In the span of a single generation, the great empires of the Late Bronze Age, the Mycenaeans in Greece, the Hittites in Anatolia, the Egyptian New Kingdom, all came crashing down. Major cities were burned to the ground, trade routes vanished, literacy plummeted, and entire civilizations were wiped from memory. This wasn't a slow decline. It was a sudden, violent, and widespread collapse. The controversy is that nobody agrees on what caused it. Was it a perfect storm of catastrophes? A mysterious group of invaders known only as the Sea Peoples? A period of catastrophic climate change leading to widespread famine and drought? Or perhaps a systems collapse, where the interconnectedness of these empires became their undoing, like a chain of dominoes? It remains one of history's greatest and most terrifying resets. 26. The story of the Black Death is simple and horrifying. A bacterium carried by fleas, living on rats, hitchhiked along trade routes, and killed off up to half of Europe's population. It's the textbook explanation for the greatest demographic disaster in human history. But what if the textbook is wrong? This controversy challenges the very identity of the killer. Some scientists and historians argue that the bubonic plague simply doesn't fit the historical accounts. The speed at which the plague spread and its mortality rate seem far too high for a rat-borne disease. This has led to alternative theories. Perhaps the killer was an Ebola-like hemorrhagic fever, an airborne virus like pneumonic plague acting on its own, or even some terrifying, now-extinct pathogen we've never seen before. The mystery isn't that it happened, but whether we've been blaming the right microscopic culprit all along. 27. William Shakespeare of Stratford-upon-Avon, the son of a glovemaker, a man with a basic grammar school education who moved to London and somehow became the greatest writer in the history of the English language. It's a beautiful story of genius from humble beginnings. For some, It's a little too beautiful to be true. The anti-Stratfordian controversy posits that a man with his background couldn't possibly have possessed the vast knowledge of law, politics, foreign languages, and aristocratic life that fills the plays. So, who was the real author? The list of candidates is a who's who of the Elizabethan elite. The brilliant playwright Christopher Marlowe, who supposedly faked his own death, the philosopher Sir Francis Bacon, or even Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford. Was Shakespeare a real person? Or was he a convenient front for a nobleman who couldn't risk having his name attached to the disreputable world of theater? 28. To the Allied forces in World War II, the kamikaze pilot was the ultimate symbol of incomprehensible fanaticism. A soldier so brainwashed by emperor worship that he would gladly, even joyfully, throw his life away in a final, suicidal attack. But the reality was far more complex and tragic. While some were indeed fervent nationalists, the diaries and letters of many kamikaze pilots reveal a different story. They were often university students, poets, and intellectuals who were conscripted and subjected to immense psychological pressure. They wrote of their love for their families, their fear of death, and their deep sense of fatalistic duty to a country they knew was losing the war. The controversy is about their agency. Were they mindless fanatics in a death cult? Or were they ordinary young men trapped by a brutal military regime in a culture where the highest honor was to sacrifice oneself for the collective, leaving them with no honorable way out? 29. Every American kid learns that in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue and discovered a new world. This version of history has been controversial for decades, not just because the continent was already inhabited by millions, but because Columbus wasn't even the first non-indigenous person to arrive. The Vikings, led by Leif Erikson, established a settlement in Newfoundland, Canada, around 1000 AD, a full 500 years before Columbus packed his bags. But the debate doesn't stop there. Some theories, ranging from plausible to purely speculative, suggest even earlier arrivals. There's evidence of Polynesian contact in South America, and more fringe theories propose that Chinese treasure fleets, or even ancient Romans blown off course, may have reached the Americas. The real controversy isn't who was first, it was clearly the indigenous peoples, but just how wrong and oversimplified our traditional story of discovery really is. 30. In June 1950, the North Korean People's Army stormed across the 38th parallel, triggering the Korean War. The accepted narrative is that the North Korean leader, Kim Il-sung, launched a surprise invasion to unify the peninsula under communist rule. But the controversy lies in who was really pulling the strings. Was this purely Kim's war, a Korean civil conflict that the world got dragged into? Or was he essentially a puppet, given the green light, and maybe even a hard push by Joseph Stalin? Newly declassified Soviet documents show that Stalin approved the invasion plan, seeing it as a low-risk opportunity to test American resolve and expand the communist sphere of influence in Asia without committing Soviet troops. The debate centers on whether the war was an act of North Korean nationalism or just another calculated move in Stalin's global chess match against the West. 31. The evacuation of Dunkirk in 1940 is one of Britain's most cherished national myths. The miracle of Dunkirk, where a flotilla of civilian boats rescued over 300,000 Allied soldiers trapped on the beaches by the advancing German army. It's a story of resilience and civilian heroism. But the controversy is whether it was a miracle or the result of a colossal, unexplained blunder by Adolf Hitler. Just as his panzer divisions were poised to annihilate the trapped armies, Hitler issued a mysterious halt order, stopping their advance for 3 critical days. This pause gave the British time to organize the evacuation. Why did he do it? Was he, as some suggest, hoping to be merciful to the British to encourage a peace treaty? Was it a strategic disagreement with his generals? Or was it simply, as others argue, a case of overconfidence and a failure to grasp the opportunity? The miracle only happened because the enemy inexplicably stopped. 32. The emergence of HIV AIDS in the early 1980s was a terrifying medical mystery that quickly became a global pandemic. The scientific consensus is that the virus originated as SIV, simian immunodeficiency virus, in chimpanzees in Central Africa and crossed over to humans through hunting and butchering, likely in the early 20th century. However, the sheer speed and pattern of its global spread fueled intense controversy and conspiracy theories. The most prominent of these suggested that the virus didn't jump naturally. One theory claimed it was spread through contaminated oral polio vaccines tested in Africa in the 1950s. Another, more sinister theory proposed that HIV was a man-made bioweapon, engineered in a lab and deliberately released to target specific communities. While genetic evidence overwhelmingly supports a natural origin, the controversy reflects the deep mistrust and fear that surrounded the devastating early years of the epidemic. 33. The Alamo is America's ultimate underdog story, a heroic last stand for freedom against impossible odds, immortalized by the cry, "Remember the Alamo." But the controversy asks if it was heroic at all. Was it a strategically pointless blunder by men who defied direct orders to retreat? More pointedly, a key motivation for the Texas Revolution was the preservation of slavery, which Mexico had abolished. This reframes the legendary battle from a pure fight for liberty into a much murkier conflict over the right to own other people, turning heroes into something far more complicated. The past won't sit quietly. It keeps poking us with unanswered questions and half-truths dressed as facts. So tell me, which of these official versions do you think is the most ridiculous scam ever sold as history? Let's rip it open in the comments. And if you want more unfiltered chaos from the past, hit like and subscribe. The next rabbit hole is waiting.